So everybody will be looking at, well, perhaps the body language. Whenever there's a debate like this, no matter the format, the leaders will be aware that we're watching a performance, and body language is, of course, important, has a lot to do with the way we receive their message. Let's speak now to Darren Stanton. He's a body language expert. He joins me now from Nottingham, and as we've been hearing, both Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May have been practicing. What are the pitfalls? What will they have been told to avoid?
Good evening. I think any gesture that conveys insincerity or defensiveness. So one of the things that I look for is what we call a baseline. So obviously both politicians are very well coached. So if any questions are asked that the politicians particularly not happy to answer, there'll be sort of a distinct break in their pattern of behaviour. So, you know, defensive things like folding arms, putting hands in pockets, these are sort of breaks in the normal gestures that both politicians generally use.
And of course, one thinks of American elections of the past. Sweating is an issue, isn't it?
Absolutely, because again, you know, sweating, generally people tend to think that comes over as being insincere, or maybe the fact that they've got something to hide. So yeah, I think sweating potentially could be something that may make the voters think, yeah, there's something not quite right here.
And in terms of how they answer the questions, the audience will follow up. So they've got to be straight, haven't they, tonight?
Absolutely. I mean, with 96% of communication being non-verbal, I think voters will be looking or hearing not just what politicians are saying, but almost what they're not saying, and also is their body language consistent and congruent with the message that they're trying to convey.
Is this a debate or a discussion at least that can be lost much more easily than it can be won?
I think so. I think it's going to be very interesting and potentially very close. I mean, if either politician, maybe says the wrong thing inadvertently, even though if they've had a sort of a perfect performance, I think, one thing could be the tipping point and be the difference that makes the difference to the whole debate.
And what are those little things that perhaps most of us don't notice? What will you be looking out for that perhaps gives away how they're feeling at that particular moment?
Well, in terms of the way that people present themselves is linked to emotion. So there's a thing called micro-expressions, which are very fleeting flashes of emotion, which last about a fifth of a second. And these are generally happy, sad, fear, anger, surprise, contempt and disgust. So if either politician's saying, yeah, I'm very happy to answer that question, but then suddenly they flash a micro-expression of fear, why would they be masking an emotion of fear? So I'll be looking for what we call gestural inconsistencies in terms of what they're saying and what their emotions are conveying.
Darren, I would be terrified sitting in front of an audience of 150 people without knowing that half of them were probably out to expose me. So how will they have calmed themselves down before this?
I think obviously they would have had coaches, so they'll go through a process in terms of maybe rehearsing as best they can, because the way their mind works is if we rehearse as much as possible, when they do go into the real setting, the mind will kind of imagine that it's been through it before, if that makes sense. It's called visual motor rehearsal. So, I think a little bit of nerves is always a good thing, but essentially it's just the fact that they've rehearsed so much. And again, you can't really prepare for every eventuality. So again, it's going to be very, very interesting.
Darren Stanton, thank you very much for joining us this evening.